Welcome to Wawa Sandwire. Today we're talking about the escalating academic integrity crisis facing local universities, and honestly, the scale of this particular error, it's just astounding. We were looking at an academic paper published back in 2018 in a respected journal, no less, and it made this foundational, honestly, world-shaking claim that ancient Greek civilization, democracy, philosophy, all of that, was supposedly entirely fabricated, made up by Western scholars in the 1970s.
It's an extraordinary claim, absolutely. It really strikes the very heart of classical studies. And the reason this is blown up now, it isn't just the historical revisionism itself, though that's, well, massive. It's the immediate and, frankly, intense scrutiny it's brought onto the Journal Al-Tamadun. And, well, beyond that, onto the overall rigor, you could say, of Malaysian academic research standards. This isn't just some historical debate anymore. It feels more like an institutional crisis.
Absolutely. It feels huge. So the paper itself, right? It's titled A Discourse on the Timeline of Biblical Compilation. Its relevance to the development of Islamic historical sources. The author is Professor Soleha Yaqub from the International Islamic University, Malaysia. And the claim was incredibly specific. Get this. Ancient Greece was basically a hoax, cooked up by more than 20 Western academics, supposedly pulled from the National Geographic Society, in the 70s. I mean, when you read that serious academic context, you just have to wonder what possible proof could there be?
And that's exactly what critics started asking immediately.
Yeah.
Dr. Sharifa Munira, they did some digging. They zeroed in pretty quickly on where this extraordinary claim actually came from. And what they found, well, it just shattered the paper's credibility completely. That whole second, the really sensational bit about fabricating Greece, it wasn't original research.
Yeah.
Not at all.
No. It was copied, just lifted, and not from some, obscure historical text or a contested manuscript. It was lifted wholesale from a piece of pure, unadulterated satire. We are talking about the infamous U.S. satirical news website, The Onion, you know the one. The original piece, from 2010, it was literally titled, Historians Admit to Inventing Ancient Greeks. To see that, taken from a known parody site, treated as fact in a peer-reviewed journal here. It's an academic meltdown.
Devastating is the word, because this single error, it shines a spotlight on three critical flaws happening all at once. First, just the basic failure of the author to exercise critical thinking. I mean, they completely missed that it was satire, parody. Second, the act itself, lifting the content. That's plagiarism, plain and simple. Regardless of the source, it was copied without saying where it came from.
Right. And the third point, that feels like the biggest institutional failing, doesn't it?
Precisely. The third failure hits a cardinal rule of scholarship. You just cannot use satirical material as factual evidence, ever. Unless, of course, your research is about satire or maybe misinformation. But citing The Onion as a historical source, it signals a complete breakdown in, well, basic research methodology. It casts doubt on the entire paper, unfortunately.
Which naturally brings up huge questions about the peer review process at the journal Al-Tamadun. For listeners maybe not deep in academic publishing, can you explain just how serious this oversight is? How did peer review miss something so blatant?
Well, it indicates a failure at multiple points in the chain. Most journals use peer review, where experts, specialists in the field history, religious sources, in this case, vet the work. They're supposed to check the methods, the sources, everything. A claim like this one, that ancient Greece was invented in the 70s, they should have set off massive alarm bells, huge red flags. It should have triggered immediate deep source checking. The fact that it didn't suggest, well, either the reviewers didn't bother checking the citations for this specific part, or maybe they just lack the cultural context to even recognize The Onion for what it is. It points towards potentially insufficient vetting. Maybe reviewers are overloaded. Maybe there's too much reliance on just automated checks. It's hard to say for sure, but it failed.
And the reaction has been, well, an uproar. Understandably. Critics are calling it an academic disgrace. Strong words. They're arguing, quite forcefully, that it damages the international standing of Malaysia's research culture. Dr. Sharifa Munira are being very clear. They demand the University of Malaya retract the paper. Now, it's seen as essential damage control, basically.
Exactly. And the fix they're calling for is just as strict. If the professor wants to salvage any part of her work, the paper needs to be withdrawn, pulled completely. Then it needs a thorough revision, not just deleting the bad part, but rebuilding the arguments, checking all the sources properly. And then it has to go through a completely new, rigorous, independent peer review process from scratch. It's about sending a clear signal, to the global academic world that standards here are taken seriously. Just tweaking it won't cut it when the initial integrity was so compromised.
Okay, right. Let's maybe broaden the lens a bit because it's important context. This citation mess, it doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it? The professor involved has put forward other, let's say, highly controversial historical theories before this. To really understand the date, we probably need to touch on those too.
That's a fair point. It helps to see the pattern, or at least the broader scope of her scholarship, not just this one mistake. She has consistently put forward and defended several claims that really challenge mainstream global history. And she maintains, it's important to note, that these are products of her own long-term, in-depth research. Her theories often focus on revising the timeline and importance of Southeast Asian maritime history.
Can you give us some examples? What are these other big claims she's defending? Because they do paint a very different picture of the past.
Certainly. One major claim relates to the Funan Kingdom era. She argues that ancient Malays were master shipbuilders and expert navigators much earlier than usually thought, like as far back as 1000 BCE. This pushes the timeline for advanced seafaring tech in Southeast Asia way back, crediting local groups with sophistication much earlier.
Okay, and then she connects this to the Romans. That's where it gets really interesting, right?
That's right. Her work has specifically claimed that the ancient Romans, the dominant Mediterranean naval power, initially didn't have very advanced seafaring skills. She alleges that they only learned sophisticated shipbuilding techniques after they encountered Malaysian navigators on the trade routes, both in the Med and Southeast Asia. Now, that completely flips the script on historical influence, suggesting knowledge flowed east to west for shipbuilding, which is, well, a huge challenge to conventional Roman history.
Wow. Okay. And there was a third element, too, linking back even further.
Yes, she also weaves in the Phoenicians. She argues that nautical technology development in the South Seas, meaning Southeast Asia, was also significantly influenced by Phoenician culture, particularly their shipbuilding methods. So if you look at all these claims together, you see a consistent effort to build this revised, interconnected, ancient world, one where Southeast Asian powers are really central players in trade and tech exchange. Absorbing influence, yes, but also giving influence to major Western powers like Rome.
Okay, so these are big, ambitious claims, and she insists they're based on solid academic work. But she also remains resolute, defending all these claims, even with this huge cloud now hanging over her research methodology because of the Onion citation. Despite that clear evidence of a compromise process in one instance, she stands by everything, which leads to a massive question, really, for you listening. What stands out to you here? Can these potentially groundbreaking, even if highly controversial, historical ideas still carry weight? Can they be considered seriously when the research process itself, in at least one published instance, was fundamentally flawed by citing satire as fact? Does that one breakdown invalidate the whole ambitious project? Where do you draw the line?
It's a tough question. But the overarching lesson here, I think, has to be about rigor. The critical, absolutely non-negotiable importance of rigorous fact-checking, of careful source validation, and fundamentally understanding what your sources are, primary, secondary, satire, especially now with so much information and misinformation everywhere. This incident is just such a stark, very public reminder. Academic oversight in our journals, the peer review process, it has to be watertight. The credibility of our universities, our entire research output, really hinges on maintaining those standards. And the key question going forward is how quickly, how thoroughly institutions will act to safeguard that process. Because if something this obvious can slip through, well, it makes you wonder what other, less glaring issues might be lurking unseen.
Remember to like and subscribe for more videos like this.